My name's Glenn Morris and I'm currently on a property called Billabong, just out of Inverell. This property here is 1,000 hectares, and we also have another place over at Grafton called Wilton Park. We run crossbred Brahman Hereford cattle. I started with this company about 25 years ago. I moved to Grafton with the family and turned up on a property that needed a bit of attention, and then I've been here for about the last 15, and once again we took over a property that was fairly degraded and fairly bare of ground cover. One of the reasons we looked to a block west of the range was because the soils are a lot more suited to finishing cattle, trying to get some fat cover on the cattle that we were producing. So we're now using the Grafton block predominantly for breeding with our Brahman cross Herefords, and then we bring the progeny over here, which is a second cross, and we're finishing them on the pastures here now. When I took this job on in 1998, we were already starting to get some really big, extreme climate events. Records were just, falling like dominoes. I was watching them and I didn't stop watching them. I watched them that year and I just watched them ever since, and every year we're getting record events after record events. The North End is breaking heat records at the moment, while we're flooding down here, breaking rainfall records. Not that long ago, there wasn't a blade of green grass on this entire property. There's 200 hectares of timber on the right of me, there's 100 hectares on the left. Another 6 months of heat and lack of water. Both of those hills were about to die. Even though we had done everything we could, we'd destocked, we'd been practicing biological and organic farming for 15 years. We had a really successful organic branded beef product and pork, and we had to let that go at the time because we just had no grass, and feed costs were getting astronomical. One of the things I noticed about extreme events we were getting like a big flood event, big fall of rain, might only be 6 weeks later and we're actually looking for rain and we were dry again. That really got me sort of thinking about what was going on with the landscape, where you couldn't hold the water. It just basically find its fastest way down the hill, taking with it that silt and fertility on the top and just creating erosion as it went. And so we actually broke up the paddocks using permaculture swales. There's 3 main swales on this property that run across the landscape to intercept the heavy rainfall events, and then we put the extra paddocks off those big swales. We've got a combination of like new swales that we've built, but also ones like this that are modified contour banks. All up, we could have up to 8 or 10 kilometres of soak banks now over the property, which are helping rehydrate that landscape and get everything healthy. I think the real benefit from swales is that you're taking that force out, so you're stopping that erosion in the really wet years. And previously this water would have just spilled out the end of the contour bank and straight down into the next contour, into the dam and down into the nearest gully, and then down into the Swanbrook Creek, and taken all that soil and water with it. There's a level sill to be about 10 metres wide, a bit lower, to let the water come out evenly without any force. Usually try to find a high spot there, but that water is just sitting there to soak slowly into the whole landscape and rehydrate all the land below it. It also creates a beautiful environment for wildlife, and all of the banks now have lots of frogs and quails and birds and everything that's just adding to the diversity of the farm and insect control. I believe that 2 of the biggest foundations for a successful farm operation are soils and genetics, and if you can make the most out of optimising your soil health and then put the best genetics in there that you can find, and then you've got a good chance of being successful. And I'd long heard about the attributes of the F1 Brahman Hereford cross cow and how productive and fertile and how much resistance she had to ticks and everything like that. So, we started with a Hereford herd and we put Brahman bulls in and bred that first cross, and we've stuck to that first cross because it's the maximum hybrid vigour you'll get from a female is that first cross. This block here, we're on rich basalt soils, but once again, over the years, the farming practices, the chemicals and the ploughing, a lot of the topsoil had been lost, and it needed a lot of love just to get that soil health back. Identifying that, humus had this huge water holding capacity, we started to adopt as many methods as we could of building humus. So the way that I've been building the humus here is using planned grazing. The basic concept is you've got the cattle in a paddock for a short period of time. We try to keep it under 5 days. And the beauty of getting out in a short space of time is that you've eaten the tops off the plants, but they've still got a lot of energy left to regrow. And if you're in the paddock too long, then the plants are starting to regrow and the cattle will go for the fresh shoot, and that starts to knock the plant around. Something I've found really important about the holistic management and the planned grazing, if you like, is that, just how important it is to get those densities up as high as you can to really generate a high impact, so the whole paddock's getting the organic matter back into the soil. If you're really changing the composition of the plant species and getting that diversity, the more impact you can get, the greater the soil change, the soil health change, and then you see the better species coming in and the soil health really ramping up. We've been using a biological consultant for years, looking at our mineralisation in our soils. It was really important for me to sort of really get in tune with what was going to be good for building the soil mineralisation, but also the soil biology. Going on the soil tests and what was lacking, we've used a combination of dry minerals like calcium and sulphur, and also we use a lot of foliar products as well for the trace minerals, which we find really efficient. We've noticed a marked improvement in the pasture health from doing that. We're standing on a living planet that gives us life, and if it's not healthy, what we're standing on, then we're in real trouble. I think this landscape, I've scratched the surface on what's possible here as far as soil health and as far as vegetation and diversity. As farmers, we can be managing healthy areas of the landscape which affect the climate and the atmosphere, so we can have healthy soil in between the healthy forests and really start to make a difference with the planet. I mean, I don't see a choice in that.